What if the man who stood before his church, weeping, apologizing to his wife and son, was still hiding the darkest part of the truth? You've heard his confession, but what about the ones who say they were never given a voice? The ones left behind in silence. Today, we dig into the apology that made headlines, and the secrets it left out. The truth the church never wanted you to hear. This is more than just a public apology, this is a reckoning. A deep, disturbing look behind the pulpit into the controversy surrounding Lovy Elias. Buckle up. Because what we found will change everything you thought you knew. The public saw the tearful apology, the words, the emotion, the trembling voice. But what if that wasn't the full story? What if behind that carefully worded statement lies a tangled web of unanswered questions, buried truths, and voices that were never given the microphone? In this video, we're not just echoing the public narrative. We're pulling back the curtain on the story that others are too afraid to tell. Because what Lovy Elias said on stage may only be the beginning. Beneath the apology is a storm of silence, of individuals who claim their pain was ignored, their trauma dismissed. This isn't about one man's redemption arc. It's about the victims, the overlooked, and the truth that's been suffocated by reputation and image. We're diving deep into the parts of the story mainstream media skipped. The moments that weren't captured on camera. The testimonies that were never aired. Why did Lovy Elias truly step forward? Was it accountability, or damage control? And most importantly, what happens to those still left in the shadows? If you want the raw truth, the facts behind the apology, and the hidden weight this carries for the church and every life it's touched, watch until the end. Because once you hear everything, you'll understand, this story is far from over. In fact, it may have just begun. Lovy Elias was once seen as a pillar of faith, a man whose voice resonated in worship halls and whose leadership inspired thousands. His presence in the church community was almost untouchable, a respected figure, a spiritual guide, and a family man. That's why, when he stepped forward with a public apology, the shockwaves were immediate. The man who had preached redemption and integrity was now confessing to personal failings. His words were heavy with emotion. He spoke of hurting the very people he was supposed to protect, of letting down his family and his flock. On the surface, it felt raw and remorseful. But beneath that emotional delivery, something didn't sit right. His apology, while heartfelt, felt curated, delivered more like a performance than a confession. There were no specifics. No details. Just vague admissions of mistakes and wrongdoings, leaving his followers and especially the victims grasping for clarity. What exactly did he do? What was he truly sorry for? The lack of transparency raised more questions than it answered. And for those directly affected by his actions, it wasn't enough. It wasn't justice. It was a spotlight moment that offered sentiment, but no substance. And now, the silence between his words is louder than ever. We're here to find out what the real reasons were for the apology, but first, they don't want you to know this shocking fact. Reports and testimonies from victims say that the church leadership ignored or downplayed their stories, even after Elias apologized. And that's just the beginning. In the next section, we'll look at how the church community and his family reacted to the apology and how those responses show cracks in the church community's immediate response to Lovy Elias's public apology was a mix of shock, support, confusion, and, in some places, complete silence. What was supposed to be a moment of healing quickly revealed deeper tensions that many weren't ready to talk about in public. First, let's talk about the church itself. Lovy had built a reputation as a trusted spiritual leader who led congregations and was respected by peers. So when the apology came out, when the man admitted to wrongdoing but didn't give the whole story, church leaders were put in a tough spot. How do you support a man who says he's sorry but won't say what happened? How do you mix forgiveness with accountability? Official statements from the church were cautious and carefully worded. Many leaders praised Elias for having the courage to say sorry and stressing themes of grace and redemption. However, there was a noticeable lack of action or follow-up. No clear steps were laid out to protect the victims or address the accusations had come up before the apology. The congregation's divided feelings were clear. Some rallied behind Elias, noting his years of service and stressing the Christian call to forgive. Others felt betrayed and unheard, angry at what they saw as a lack of openness. The victims' voices seemed to get lost in the noise, and many were very upset that the church's answer seemed to be more about fixing the problem than doing what was right. Now, Elias's family, his wife and son, reacted in a way that added to the anger. This story is getting more complicated as it goes on. In video messages and social media posts, they openly accepted the apology and said they hoped for healing and unity. But behind closed doors, they didn't say those things. Sources say the family is having a hard time dealing with the fallout. Imagine how hard it is on your emotions to live in the public eye while your private pain is shown to everyone. Reports say Elias's wife has been dealing with betrayal, confusion, and heartbreak. Reports also say that Elias's son is going through a lot of mental stress because he loves both. The truth about his father and the scandal. It's important to understand that this apology wasn't just a PR stunt, it was the spark that shattered a family's relationship and showed cracks in the church community. But here's the part that most people don't talk about. Several close insiders say that the apology didn't do much to calm the storm. Instead, it led to more questions, especially from people who say they were hurt by Elias's actions and the church's failure to act sooner. Next, we'll hear. We talked to some of the victims and heard their stories, their pain, and why they don't think the apology is enough. Until now, their voices have been mostly ignored, but today we bring their truth to light. This is where the story takes a crucial turn. While Lovy Elias's apology made headlines and his family publicly expressed their hope for healing, there is another side to this story that has been mostly ignored: the victims. For many of them, this apology felt like a band-aid over a wound that had been left to fester for far too long. Reached out to several people who say Elias's actions had a direct effect on them. These are not accusations that were made without proof or on the spur of the moment. They are personal accounts from people who have kept their pain hidden for fear of being judged or punished. One victim who wants to remain anonymous told us about the heavy emotional load she has been carrying for years. She said she felt trapped in a community that put image over truth and where speaking out meant risking everything: relationships, reputation, even her life. One's faith. She told how a trusted leader betrayed her and used his power in the church to take advantage of weak members. "I never wanted this to become public," she said. "I just wanted someone to listen and believe me." The apology was nice to hear, but it didn't change what happened to me or to others. Another voice came from a young man who said that his trust in spiritual leaders was broken after what he went through. He talked about how the church leadership ignored his complaints, calling them unimportant. As misunderstandings or exaggerations, they told me to forgive and move on. But no one was really responsible, which is why so many of us didn't speak up. We didn't feel safe. What makes this story tragic is that these victims are still waiting for real justice to recognize that their suffering is real. They say that an apology, no matter how sincere, can't erase the pain or the effects of what happened. They want systemic change, protection, and transparency to make sure this never happens again. The silence is. Many victims feel that the church put protecting its image and a popular leader ahead of the well-being of those who were hurt the most. But here's the crazy part: some victims say that after the apology, they were put under more pressure to stay quiet, and some even feared backlash or being shunned by their own communities. This begs the question of how healing can begin when victims feel unheard or ignored. In the next section, we'll look at the bigger issues. What this scandal means for the church as an organization, the faith of its members, and the call for spiritual leaders to be held accountable. Now that we've heard from the victims and seen how their families and the church have responded, it's time to take a step back and look at the bigger picture. Lovy Elias's public apology isn't just a personal reckoning, it's a moment that shines a harsh light on deep-seated problems in the church and spiritual leadership groups. To begin, think about how this scandal affects other people. How trustworthy the church is. The church is supposed to be a safe place where people can trust each other and heal. When a trusted leader is accused of wrongdoing and the response is weak or vague, it shakes the foundation of trust. People start to doubt the leader's sincerity and the institution's overall honesty, which can have devastating effects. Some members may leave the church completely disappointed and hurt, while others may hold on to their faith stronger but quietly struggle with doubt and confusion especially for younger members, seeing a well-known figure fall so publicly raises tough questions about spiritual authority and accountability. But what makes this scandal so painful is that it shows systemic problems that go beyond one person. The church's initial reluctance to fully confront the allegations against Elias points to a larger culture of putting reputation over people. This culture can lead to places where abuse of power goes unchecked, victims are ignored, and real reform stops. This isn't. It's not just a guess. Experts on religious groups have warned that problems like this will keep happening if there isn't openness and responsibility. Now let's talk about faith for many followers. Because faith is so personal and holy, the pain that comes from bad leadership can feel like a betrayal not only by a person but also by the beliefs that person holds dear. To make peace with that pain, leaders need to do more than say sorry, they need to take action. Some churches that have had similar problems have taken action by being honest and committing to change. Brave moves setting up independent review boards, giving victims counseling and support, and making it safer to report crimes are all examples of efforts that show redemption and reform are possible, but only if the community puts truth over image. But here's where fate took a surprising turn. Instead of bringing the church together, the apology started new debates about power, forgiveness, and justice that are still going on and will likely shape the future of this community. This is one of the most controversial parts of the apology. Scandal is what the church leadership did during and after the accusations against Lovy Elias came to light. Churches are supposed to be strongholds of moral guidance and safety, but many people think the leadership failed to do that in this case. When the first concerns were raised, sources close to the situation say that some leaders chose silence over openness instead of starting their own investigation or publicly responding to the claims they are said to be protecting. Elias's popularity and the church's public photograph. This increases serious questions. When does loyalty to a leader grow to be loyalty to wrongdoing, and how often does fear of scandal purpose establishments to brush abuse under the rug? The church's hesitance to confront the issue hidden left victims feeling abandoned and betrayed. Professionals on organizational ethics argue that without clean guidelines and outside oversight, spiritual institutions are liable to exactly those styles of failures. They endorse establishing impartial boards, obligatory reporting protocols, and survivor aid programs to save you abuse and foster accountability. However, right here's the stunning part many don't understand. Some whistleblowers within the church declare they have been pressured or even threatened to maintain quiet, highlighting how deep the hassle goes. This is not just about one man, it's about a gadget that allowed this to occur and continues to allow silence in the face of injustice. Whilst the injuries are sparkling and the ache runs deep, there are signs of hope and resilience in the church network. Many individuals, which includes former sufferers, are coming forward to call for reform, and healing help groups have all started to shape, imparting safe spaces for survivors to percentage their stories and start the lengthy procedure of restoration. Those businesses emphasize that healing isn't always linear, it is messy, complex, and calls for ongoing dedication. Churches within the place also are starting to re-examine their management structures, implementing new training on abuse prevention and ethical behavior. A few leaders have overtly apologized for their disasters, signaling a shift toward greater humility and duty. Yet there may be nonetheless a protracted way to head victims' name for greater than just inner changes. They need transparency, justice, and criminal accountability. Many believe that without outside stress from the broader public and felony authorities, meaningful exchange could be gradual or superficial. This disaster serves as a AA003E33992A1424449A037E2560BF2 to all non-secular groups ignoring abuse. Handiest perpetuates damage. It needs a collective dedication to safeguarding each member and developing in surroundings in which faith and safety coexist. And right here's in which it gets thrilling. Some families who once stood silently in the back of leaders are now publicly advocating for sufferers, displaying a powerful shift in how this network confronts its challenges. At the heart of this controversy are the victims, actual humans whose lives have been deeply suffering from what took place. Their voices frequently go unheard, overshadowed by means of public family members' spin and institutional silence. However, their memories are Essential now not just for information what went wrong but for uplifting change. Numerous sufferers have bravely improved sharing painful money owed of betrayal, manipulation, and the long avenue to recovery. Their braveness to speak out shines a mile at the urgent want for transparency and guide in the church. One survivor described feeling remote and scared for years, uncertain whom to agree with. Every other spoke about the emotional toll of seeing their abuser publicly express regret even as the church regarded reluctant to absolutely well known their pain. These tales monitor a commonplace thread: the deep wounds prompted no longer best by using the abuse, however, by the community's initial failure to protect them. Felony specialists note that such cases spotlight the demanding situations victims face in looking for justice, particularly whilst powerful establishments are concerned. Many survivors hesitate to come ahead due to worry of backlash or disbelief. That's why public support and recognition are vital. But right here's the heartbreaking truth: many victims nevertheless look forward to closure, and a few query if actual justice will ever be served. Their testimonies remind us why this communiqué subjects allotted is approximately accountability sure, however extra importantly. It's about humanity, compassion, and growing a more secure future for absolutely everyone. As we come to the give up of this deeply complicated and emotional story, it's clear that Lovy Elias's apology is simply one chapter in a far larger narrative that is a story not best approximately one guy's mistakes but about the complete church community, its struggles, its failures, and its capability for recuperation. What we've exposed today is that apologies, at the same time as important, are most effective. The start: they can't update justice or fact, nor can they erase the trauma experienced by means of victims. For actual restoration to occur, the church should do greater than difficulty statements. It must concentrate, truly concentrate, to those who have been hurt, and it have to take meaningful steps toward accountability. This means transparent investigations, help structures for victims, and a tradition shift that prioritizes protection and integrity over photo and recognition. Without those modifications, records dangers repeating itself, and more sufferers will hold to go through in silence. For Lovy Elias, the road ahead may be tough, accept as true. With that has been broken takes time and constant effort to rebuild. His public apology could have been a primary step, however actions need to follow words. The church leadership too faces an essential second: will they stand through the victims and call for responsibility, or will they keep to protect their own? As viewers, what can we study from this story? It's a reminder to maintain leaders accountable, to create safe areas for victims to speak, and to demand transparency from institutions that wield energy over our religion and groups you might not consider. What number of stories like this go untold, swept beneath the rug for the sake of protecting reputations? It's time we exchange that narrative. With the aid of staying knowledgeable and talking up, we are able to assist, make certain that victims are heard and that nobody's ache is dismissed or ignored. Like this video in case you trust sufferers deserve justice and that accountability is vital for restoration. Comment under, share your mind on this tale, or in case you've experienced something similar. Your voice topics. Join this channel for extra in-depth stories that disclose truths and shed mild on arguable issues you may not listen anywhere else. Percentage this video to assist, enhance focus, and aid folks who are nevertheless expecting their voices to be heard. Collectively we can be a part of the change. Live robust, live informed, and don't forget, truth and recuperation begin with us.